Welcome to a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, a narrative woven from threads of terror and mystery, inspired by some of America's most shocking cases. Tales like these remind us of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of normalcy, and of the power of human resilience when confronted with unimaginable horror. If you're ready to step into a world where chilling crime and relentless pursuit intertwine, please ensure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any captivating stories in the future. Your support helps me continue to bring you insightful and thrilling narratives like this. Now, let us together explore one of the most spine-chilling cases that ever haunted America. A 3-chapter story of fear, enigma, and the unending battle between light and shadow. The tranquil town of Havenwood, Ohio, had always prided itself on its quiet streets, its tightly knit community, and the comforting predictability of Midwestern life. Nestled amidst rolling cornfields and bordered by the meandering Havenwood River, it was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and children rode bicycles freely until dusk. That serenity, however, was about to be shattered, irrevocably and violently, by a shadow that crept from the darkest corners of human depravity. It began subtly, almost inconspicuously, on a crisp autumn evening in late September. Eleanor Vance, a 72-year-old widow known for her prize-winning petunias and her fiercely independent spirit, failed to answer her daily phone call from her sister. Concerned, her sister contacted the local police. Officer Miller, a fresh-faced recruit barely out of the academy, was dispatched to perform a welfare check. He found the front door ajar, a small, unsettling detail in a town where locked doors were a rarity even at night. Inside, the scene was meticulously undisturbed, a testament to a meticulous intruder. Eleanor Vance lay in her living room, her face serene, almost peaceful, save for the faint, livid marks around her neck. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, and nothing appeared to be missing. It looked eerily, like she had simply gone to sleep and never woken up, except for the telltale bruising. The only anomaly, tiny and almost overlooked, was a single, impossibly fine crimson thread, barely an inch long, delicately tucked beneath the collar of her nightgown. Detective Sarah Collins, a seasoned veteran with a knack for the subtle nuances of human behavior, arrived at the scene. Her sharp, intelligent eyes, usually brimming with a wry humor, hardened as she surveyed the room. Beside her was Detective Mark Jensen, a younger, more by-the-book officer whose ambition was matched only by his meticulousness. "No signs of forced entry, Miller?" Collins asked, her voice a low murmur. "No, Detective. Windows are all locked from the inside, back door too. Looks like she might have known her attacker, or let them in willingly." Miller's voice wavered slightly, the gravity of his first murder scene weighing heavily on him. Collins knelt beside Eleanor, her gaze lingering on the crimson thread. She carefully plucked it with tweezers, dropping it into an evidence bag. "Jensen, get forensics to comb this place. Every square inch. I want to know if a dust mite farted in here." The initial assumption was a robbery gone wrong, despite the lack of anything stolen. Havenwood's last murder had been almost a decade ago. A domestic dispute quickly resolved. This felt different. Colder, more calculated. The town buzzed with whispers, but no one truly believed it was the start of something sinister. 2 weeks later, the whispers turned into a collective gasp of terror. David Chun, a 38-year-old high school history teacher and beloved coach of the junior soccer team, was found in his modest home on the other side of Havenwood. Like Eleanor Vance, there was no forced entry. Like Eleanor Vance, he had been strangled, the same chilling, precise marks on his neck. And like Eleanor Vance, a single, crimson thread, identical in length and hue, was found tucked into the lapel of his favorite tweed jacket, which he'd been wearing. Collins felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. 2 victims, seemingly unconnected, an elderly widow and a middle-aged teacher, yet linked by an identical ritualistic signature. "This isn't random, Mark," she stated, her voice tight. "This is a statement. Someone is sending us a message." The Havenwood Police Department, accustomed to petty theft and public intoxication, found itself suddenly thrust into a national spotlight. Local news outlets descended, followed by larger regional networks, hungry for details on the Crimson Thread Killer, a moniker coined by a particularly sensationalist reporter. Panic began to ripple through the community. Doors that had been left open for decades were now bolted and double-locked. Children were forbidden from playing outside after dark. Suspicion, a corrosive acid, began to eat away at the town's once unbreakable trust. Collins and Jensen worked relentlessly, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of dread. They interviewed hundreds, tracked countless leads, but every path led to a dead end. Eleanor Vance had no known enemies. David Chun was universally liked. There was no connection between their lives, no shared acquaintances, no common threads beyond the one left by their killer. The crimson thread itself was a generic polyester fiber, commonly used in various textile industries, offering no specific point of origin. It was almost as if the killer had chosen its ubiquity, reveling in its frustrating anonymity. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned FBI profiler brought in from Quantico, arrived in Havenwood, her presence a grim testament to the escalating crisis. Reed was a woman of sharp intellect and unnerving calm, her eyes seeming to pierce through the most intricate lies. She immediately recognized the chilling precision of the killer. "This isn't a frenzied act," she observed, her gaze sweeping over the crime scene photos of David Chun. "This is controlled, deliberate." The lack of forced entry suggests a charming, manipulative individual, someone who can gain trust easily. The tidiness of the scenes points to an organized killer. He's careful, meticulous, and takes pride in his work. "And the thread?" Collins asked, her voice laced with exhaustion. "What does it mean?" "A signature, a calling card. It's unique enough to be noticed, but common enough to offer no immediate clues. It's his way of saying, 'I was here, and I will be again.' It's a challenge." Reed paused, her voice dropping slightly. "This individual feels a sense of control, a power over life and death. He's likely seeking validation, perhaps correcting perceived wrongs, or enacting a dark fantasy." The next victim was Amelia Thorne, a 24-year-old aspiring artist who worked part-time at the local coffee shop. Known for her vibrant, optimistic personality, her disappearance wasn't initially connected. She simply didn't show up for her shift. Her apartment was empty. Friends and family plastered missing flyers throughout Havenwood, a new layer of fear now mixed with despair. Then, 3 days later, Amelia was found. Not in her home, but in the town's meticulously kept public park, near the gazebo where summer concerts were held. Her body was arranged almost artistically, draped over a park bench, a single crimson thread woven intricately into a braid of her long, auburn hair. This was different. This was public. This was a spectacle. The discovery sent a shockwave through Havenwood that dwarfed the previous 2 murders. The killer had escalated. He was no longer content with the privacy of homes. He was now brazenly staking his claim in the heart of the community. The park, once a symbol of Havenwood's idyllic charm, became a macabre monument to fear. Children were pulled from schools, businesses saw their foot traffic plummet, and a self-imposed curfew descended upon the town, the streets eerily empty after dusk. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion, wondering if the quiet mailman, the friendly librarian, or the unassuming gas station attendant harbored the darkness of the Crimson Thread Killer. Collins stood by Amelia's body, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot, the crisp air biting at her exposed skin. Reed stood beside her, silent, her expression grim. "He's taunting us," Collins whispered, her voice raw with a mix of fury and helplessness. "He wants us to know he's here, that he owns this town." Reed nodded slowly. "He's confident. He's evolving. And unless we stop him, he won't stop until he's satisfied his dark urges, whatever they may be. We're no longer just looking for a killer detective. We're in a psychological war." The chill in Reed's voice was not from the cold, but from the terrifying realization that Havenwood was dealing with a predator unlike anything it had ever known. A phantom weaving a crimson trail of death and terror, tightening its grip on the once peaceful town. The hunt had officially begun, and the stakes could not be higher. The murder of Amelia Thorne in such a public manner plunged Havenwood into an abyss of fear and paranoia. The initial shock gave way to a palpable sense of siege. The once bustling town square became a ghost town after 6 p.m., storefronts shuttered, their windows reflecting the lonely glow of streetlights. Every unfamiliar car, every late-night shadow, every quiet neighbor became a potential threat. The Crimson Thread killer had effectively choked the life out of Havenwood, replacing its vibrant pulse with a suffocating dread. Collins and Jensen found themselves working 20-hour days, their faces etched with exhaustion, their eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. The pressure from Chief Miller, the mayor's office, and a relentless national media circus was immense. Task forces were expanded, bringing in more FBI agents and state police, but the sheer volume of tips, false sightings, and crank calls threatened to drown them. Each new lead, however promising, dissolved into nothing, leaving behind only the bitter taste of defeat. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the FBI profiler, became an indispensable, albeit unsettling, presence in the investigation room. Her insights were chillingly accurate, building a portrait of a killer who was both cunning and deeply disturbed. "He's an organized individual," Reed reiterated during one of their endless briefings, gesturing to a whiteboard filled with psychological profiles and victimology charts. "Highly intelligent, probably above average. He plans meticulously, stalks his victims, and executes his attacks with precision. The strangulation implies a desire for intimate control, a hands-on approach. He wants to feel their life drain away under his touch." "But why these victims?" Jensen asked, tapping his pen impatiently against a notepad. "An elderly widow, a beloved teacher, a young artist. What's the connection? There's no apparent motive, no sexual assault, no robbery, no clear revenge." Reed paused, her gaze distant as if sifting through unseen patterns. "The lack of obvious motive is a motive in itself. He's not driven by material gain or sexual gratification. He's driven by power, by a need to assert control over life and death. The victims may represent something symbolic to him, something he perceives as an affront, or perhaps they simply embody a quality he despises or envies. Or, perhaps more chillingly, they are simply opportunities, chosen for their vulnerability and their capacity to provoke the maximum public reaction." Forensic analysis of the Crimson Threads continued to yield frustratingly little. They were identical, the same weave, the same dye, the same polyester blend, but produced by countless textile factories across the globe. No unique identifier, no batch number, no specific factory link. It was a perfect, maddeningly anonymous signature. The only minor breakthrough came from a microscopic analysis by a meticulous forensic technician, who discovered minuscule traces of a rare, non-native pollen on one of the threads found with Amelia Thorne. The pollen belonged to a species of orchid, Paphiopedilum insignia, commonly known as the lady slipper orchid, known to grow in very specific, specialized indoor environments, such as conservatories or dedicated orchid nurseries. This was the first true physical clue, but its significance remained elusive. The killer, emboldened by his success and the police's apparent helplessness, escalated his attacks once more. The next victims were Dr. Peter and Martha Davies, a respected retired couple, beloved for their volunteer work at the local animal shelter. They were found in their home, meticulously arranged in their bed, holding hands. The crimson threads were intertwined, like a morbid wedding band, around their wrists. This act, so intimate and yet so terrifyingly public in its discovery, sent a shudder of revulsion through Havenwood. The killer was not just taking lives. He was desecrating sacred bonds, mocking the very fabric of community and love. Collins felt the weight of each death like a physical blow. She saw the fear in the eyes of her neighbors, the distrust creeping into every conversation. Her own nights were plagued by nightmares, fragments of crime scenes, and the haunting image of the crimson thread. Jensen, usually stoic, began to show cracks in his composure, snapping at colleagues and pushing himself to the brink of collapse. The investigation was taking a toll, slowly but surely, on everyone involved. The task force threw everything they had at the new clue. They canvassed every garden center, every botanical society, every orchid enthusiast in a 5-state radius. Leads were followed, interviews were conducted, but no clear connection to anyone matching the profiler's description emerged. The lady slipper orchid was a hobbyist's dream, not a commercial plant, further complicating the search. It suggested a person with a specific solitary interest, a detail that fit the profile of an organized, introverted killer. One evening, while poring over aerial maps of Havenwood, Collins noticed something peculiar. The locations of the murders, while seemingly disparate, formed an almost perfect, albeit irregular, pentagon around the town's geographical center. Eleanor Vance's house in the north, David Chen's to the east, Amelia Thorne in the park at the west, and the Davies home in the southeast. The fifth point of this macabre star was empty. "He's mapping this out," she murmured, tracing the pattern with a red pen. "He's creating something, a constellation of his victims." Reed, who had been quietly observing, leaned over the map. "A ritualistic element. He's imposing his will on the landscape. This isn't just about the victims. It's about the stage. Havenwood itself is his canvas." Her voice was low, filled with a chilling revelation. "The fifth point, that's where he'll strike next, or where he intends for his ultimate statement to be made." The pressure intensified exponentially. Knowing the killer's potential next target location, a vacant lot, an old warehouse, perhaps even a public building that sat at the calculated center, didn't make the hunt any easier. They increased patrols, set up surveillance, but the town was too sprawling, the potential targets too numerous. The climax of this chapter of fear came not with another death, but with a terrifying near-miss. Sarah Collins, feeling an inexplicable pull to revisit Amelia Thorne's apartment, found herself in the quiet, deserted hallway of the building. As she prepared to leave, a faint creak from the apartment directly across the hall caught her attention. The door was slightly ajar. Instinct, sharp and cold, flared within her. She drew her weapon, pushing the door open slowly. The apartment was dark, dusty, and clearly abandoned. But on a small, rickety table in the living room, illuminated by the beam of her flashlight, sat a single, meticulously carved wooden bird. It was a cardinal, its feathers rendered with exquisite detail, its tiny painted eye glinting in the light, and clutched in its beak, a single, impossibly fine crimson thread. Collins felt a jolt of ice shoot through her veins. This wasn't just a clue. It was a personal message. The killer had been here in the building directly across from his victims, possibly watching. And he had left this for them, for her. It was a gesture of calculated audacity, a taunt from a predator who now felt utterly untouchable. The implications were horrifying. He wasn't just observing his victims. He was observing the investigators. The net was closing, but it wasn't around the killer, it was around them. The game had just become deadly personal. The discovery of the carved wooden bird with the crimson thread was a seismic shift in the investigation. It confirmed Dr. Reed's hypothesis. The killer was deeply embedded in Havenwood, a ghost in plain sight, observing their every move. The bird, an intricate piece of craftsmanship, wasn't just a signature. It was a piece of him. It was personal, a tangible link to his identity beyond the anonymous thread. Collins, holding the small, chilling artifact, felt a surge of cold fury. "He's not just playing games, he's mocking us," she stated, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "This bird means something to him. It's unique. It has to lead somewhere." Reed, examining the bird under a magnifying glass, nodded. "The detail, the choice of wood, the specific style. This is a skilled artisan. Someone who dedicates time and care to their craft. It points to a solitary hobby, a meticulous nature. And the cardinal, a symbol of hope and visitation, but here, inverted into a harbinger of death." The task force pivoted, their focus now squarely on the wooden bird. They canvassed local craft stores, woodworking guilds, art galleries, and antique shops, showing photos of the cardinal. It was a slow, painstaking process. Days bled into weeks, and the frustration mounted. Havenwood remained a town under siege, its residents living in perpetual fear. The fifth point of the killer's macabre pentagon remained untouched, a silent threat looming over the town. Then a breakthrough. A small, unassuming antique shop on the outskirts of Havenwood, Timeless Treasures, run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, offered the first real lead. She recognized the style. "Oh, that's Arthur Finch's work," she said, her voice a little shaky when she learned why the detectives were asking. "He's a quiet man, an archivist at the Havenwood Historical Society. Comes in sometimes, always polite. He carves these magnificent birds, mostly cardinals, says they remind him of his mother." Arthur Finch, a librarian, an archivist, quiet, unassuming, blends into the background. It fit Dr. Reed's profile perfectly. Intelligent, meticulous, precise, someone who would go unnoticed, someone who valued order and history, perhaps even control. And an archivist would have access to old town records, maps, possibly even the precise geographical data needed to plot his pentagon of victims. Collins and Jensen felt a sudden, electric jolt of adrenaline mixed with dread. Could it truly be this simple after all this time? Or was it another clever misdirection? A background check on Arthur Finch revealed nothing suspicious: a clean record. No history of violence. No psychiatric evaluations. He lived alone in a small, well-maintained house on the edge of town, just outside the known crime zones. He was, to all outward appearances, the embodiment of a quiet, respectable citizen. The very definition of the face-in-the-crowd killer. Under Reed's guidance, they began a covert surveillance operation on Arthur Finch. For days, they watched him. He went to work, came home, tended his small garden, visited the local library, always moving with an almost robotic predictability. He was a creature of habit, a master of routine. They waited, looking for any deviation, any slip. One evening, as dusk settled over Havenwood, Collins observed Finch through the scope of a long-range camera. He was in his backyard greenhouse, a small, glass-paneled structure shimmering faintly in the twilight. He meticulously tended to a collection of plants, his movements precise and deliberate. And then Collins saw it. Bathed in the soft, artificial glow from inside the greenhouse was a veritable jungle of rare orchids, including the distinctive, delicate blooms of the Paphiopedilum insignia, the lady slipper orchid. The pieces slammed into place. The pollen, the carved birds, the meticulous nature, the unassuming facade. Arthur Finch wasn't just a suspect. He was their killer. The plan to apprehend Finch was meticulously crafted. They couldn't risk him escaping, nor could they risk him harming anyone else. They needed a solid reason for a warrant, something beyond a tip from an antique dealer and orchid pollen. They needed to connect him directly to a victim. Jensen revisited the Chun and Vance crime scenes, going over every detail again, searching for anything missed. And then he found it. A single, almost invisible splinter of wood, no bigger than a grain of rice, embedded in the carpet near David Chen's body. It was too small to be noticed in the initial sweep, but with their new focus, it stood out. Forensic analysis confirmed it. The wood was a rare, imported variety of mahogany, often used for intricate carvings. A match to the wooden cardinal. With the physical evidence secured, a warrant was swiftly obtained. The raid on Arthur Finch's house was executed with precision and overwhelming force. Collins led the team, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and grim determination. They breached the front door, shouting commands, weapons raised. Arthur Finch was found in his living room, sitting in an armchair, calmly reading a book. He looked up, his expression unreadable, devoid of surprise or fear. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, almost gentle. The house was a testament to his meticulous nature. Every book was alphabetized, every item precisely placed. In his study, they found his carving tools, half-finished wooden birds, and spools of crimson thread, the exact same thread used in the murders. But it was in his journals, neatly stacked on his desk, that the true horror of his mind was revealed. Finch had kept a chillingly detailed account of each murder. The planning, the stalking, the execution. His motives, though twisted, began to surface. He believed he was cleansing Havenwood, ridding it of individuals he deemed imperfect or disorderly. Eleanor Vance, for her clutter and her unruly garden. David Chun, for his disruptive influence on youth sports. Amelia Thorne, for her loud art and chaotic spirit. The Davies, for their self-righteous charity. He saw himself as an arbiter of order, a quiet god imposing his twisted sense of purity on the town. The crimson thread was his signature, but also a symbol of the ties he believed he was severing, the imperfections he was excising. Collins looked at Finch, who remained disturbingly calm even as he was cuffed, a blank slate of a man whose inner world was a horrifying tapestry of delusion and death. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, needing to understand. Finch finally looked at her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "Order, detective. Someone has to bring order to the chaos. I was simply pruning the garden." His eyes held a chilling, detached satisfaction, a complete absence of remorse. Arthur Finch, the Crimson Thread killer, was taken into custody, his reign of terror finally over. The news brought a collective, cathartic sigh of relief to Havenwood, but the scars would remain. The fear wouldn't vanish overnight. The town had been irrevocably changed, its innocence shattered. In the aftermath, Collins and Jensen, though exhausted, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had stopped the monster, but the psychological toll was immense. Collins often found herself looking at quiet, unassuming people, wondering about the darkness that might lie beneath their placid exteriors. Jensen, too, had lost a part of his youthful optimism, seeing the world through a much darker lens. Havenwood eventually began its slow, painful process of healing. The park reopened, children cautiously played in the streets, and doors were slowly, hesitantly unlocked again. But the memory of the Crimson Thread killer, and the Crimson Threads themselves, would forever remain a stark reminder of the fragile line between order and chaos, and the chilling truth that true evil often wears the most ordinary of faces. The story of Arthur Finch, the quiet archivist who became Havenwood's most notorious monster, would be whispered for generations, a grim legend etched into the soul of a town that once believed itself safe, but learned the hard way that shadows can lurk anywhere, even in the most peaceful of places.